tonight is my late wife's yortzeit. And later tonight, we'll get together the Mishpoch and learn Mishnayos. Tomorrow, after we go up to the kever, we'll have a Suda, and then we'll have a Siyum Mashas. Every year, Ne'ilas HaChag Simchas Torah, I make a Siyum Mashas in my shul. But last Simchas Torah, because of COVID-19, we postponed the Siyum, so we're going to have it tomorrow night at the end of the Suda. Le'ilui Nishmas, Moras Pesia Yente, Bas HaRav Rebisol Arya. So the Torah we learned today, this is naturally the first year I'm giving on the Yortzeit, because by you it's early afternoon, but by us it's right for the Shkia. So the Torah we learned today is Le'ilui Nishmas, my Eishes Neurim, Pesiyente, Bas HaRav Rebisol Arya. So the Torah we learn should be Le'ilui Nishmas, and she should be a Meditzas Yosef for the entire family.
There was a request by some of the Eilim after Rav to speak a minute or two about her for today with Mechazik us a bit.
She was a very special wife, very special mother, very special person. She was anything but a Rebbetzin. And one of the prominent members of our community once turned to her and addressed her as Rebbetzin, and she said, "If you're ever going to call me Rebbetzin again, I'll never talk to you." And I was very happy with that because, I'm enough competent as a Rav without having my wife help me, and she dedicated, all her energies to the home, to the children, and she was a gewaldige Eishes Chesed. She was the best heart I ever encountered. All her life was just Chesed and caring for others, and in a very simple, unassuming way. She never thought anything she did was special, and one of the unbelievable stories, which I heard just in the Shiva. So, as a family, I usually had people driving me around, but whenever she needed to go somewhere, she contacted a certain taxi company, and she knew a few taxi drivers, simple people. But she was always nice to everyone, whether he's a Choshev HaRav or a Haredi, or a Chaloni, or a Jew, or a non-Jew. She was nice to every person. And there was a certain Nahag driver who drove her around sometimes. His name was Itzik. And once she was on her way home, and she thought that she saw his taxi on the side of the road, and it was damaged, obviously, by an accident. She wasn't sure, but she called the company to inquire that anything happened to Itzik. And they told her, yes, he had an accident a short while ago. And she asked the company, where is he? So they said in Shalit Tzedek. So she told the driver she was in the car with, take me straight to Shalit Tzedek. She went to Shalit Tzedek. He was in the Chadar Miyun. He was not in a very bad shape, but she asked him, is your wife here? He said, no, she didn't arrive yet. No one is here. So she told him, then I'll be with you until your wife arrives. She went to buy him a sandwich and a drink. She accompanied him to the x-rays, like a family member, till his wife arrived. She said goodbye. And she never told us that story, never. Only by the Shiva, Itzik came and told us the story. And the reason she didn't tell us the story is not because she wanted to hide what she's doing. It wouldn't even occur to her that this is something special. To her, it seemed every normal person would do the same. When a person is in need, you just help them. So I apologize. I'm becoming emotional. So She was a very special Eishes Chayil, Eishes Chesed, very unassuming. She wasn't Nana. She was Nana for my Torah, but she never was Nana for my Kavoida Torah. She very rarely came to my shul because she didn't feel comfortable when people stood up for her or gave her kavod. And past 2-3 years of her life, I spent a lot of time in hospitals with her. And she was always pained by the fact that she's causing Bittul Torah. And I always tried to explain her that that is not Bittul Torah. That is the essence of Torah. So once my daughter was with her in the hospital, and she was feeling very bad. And my daughter gave me a call. I should come over. Which naturally I did immediately. And then she asked me, why did you come? And I told her, you weren't feeling well. So, she was very nice. But when I left, she gave my daughter over the head. Why did you call Tati? So she was just a very special, lovely, caring human being. And that is the essence of Tzidkus. She had a lot of emunah and bitachon. She said a great deal of tehillim. So, we came together to learn Torah. So tonight is her third yahrzeit. She should be a Melitzas Yosham for the entire family. We should only know Ach Toiv V'Chesed and share B'Seres Toivos. So Thursday night, my granddaughter is getting married. So right now I have a chosen and a kala, my grandchildren. This Thursday night, my granddaughter is getting married. So there's a big simcha in the family. Chavtes Av, I have a grandson getting married. No, I'm totally confused. Actually, 2 granddaughters. What is Zaidi? Confuses a grandson with a granddaughter. So this Thursday night, or Hashem, so in the same week, we have a yahrzeit and a simcha. That is Jewish life. We cry when we need to cry, and we dance when we need to dance. So we should only share B'Seres Toivos, my dear friends. So let's learn Torah. Torah gives us chizuk every day, in every different circumstance. Shlomo, is the air conditioner causing any noise? You have difficulty hearing me? Should I put off the air conditioner?
You're hearing it perfectly. At least I am. So.
Okay, so the topic I was asked to discuss is the early Shabbos. In Chutz La'aretz, it would be strange even describing this as a topic. In every Kehel, I think, people make early Shabbosim. I'm not sure that in the Hasidic world in Chutz La'aretz, people make early Shabbosim, but there are countries, in summer, it is just impossible not to make an early Shabbos. The higher we go up north, then sometimes Seisek Yechom would be so late that you must make an early Shabbos. However, more and more people are making early Shabbosim after the plague in Eretz Yisrael. And it was said in the name of Rav Elyashiv that he was unhappy about it. And he didn't like the idea that people are making early Shabbosim. So this is a topic we will be discussing today. And in a way, it is a continuation of our previous year. So my last year wasn't last week. It was rather 2 weeks ago, because last week was Shavuos. But But I assume you all remember what we spoke about 2 weeks ago, and especially we're still in the same sugya of Tosefes Shabbos. One more apology before I start. It's probably obvious from my voice that I'm not feeling very well. A few days that I have a fever and a very bad cough. So I assume it's not that pleasant to listen to me today because my voice isn't very great. And I hope I will be able to get through the entire shiur without coughing too much. So b'siyata d'shmaya, let's embark on a short journey today. Just to revive your memory, our previous shiur about the fundamentals in Tosefes Shabbos, the Gemara Brochas Chov Zayin Amud Beis, Rav Soli Shel Shabbos Be'er Shabbos. Rav davened Shabbos Tefillah before the Shkia, before Shabbos. And the Gemara asks, is it only davening or Kiddush as well? And the Gemara says, davening plus Kiddush. Tosfos explains, but the Gemara says, you cannot daven Shabbos Erev Shabbos. Tosfos answers, if you're makabel Tosefes Shabbos, that is not a problem. You cannot have an early davening without Tosefes Shabbos. But if you're kabel Tosefes Shabbos, then it's okay. We spoke about the Rambam. The Rambam totally disregards the din of Tosefes Shabbos, even though it's a Gemara in Yom Daf Pei Aleph, the Maggid Mishnah and the Kesef Mishnah, the two most authoritative sources in explaining the Rambam's opinions. The Maggid Mishnah and the Kesef Mishnah are defined as the Noise Keilim, that Adbaz writes in a few tshuvas that the Maggid Mishnah is more authoritative in explaining and expounding the Rambam's opinion than any other of the Rishonim. And whenever I quote this Radbaz, I say, does the Radbaz mean to say that the Maggid Mishnah was greater than the Ramban or the Rashba? Of course not. But the Maggid Mishnah lived in the Rambam's house. The Ramban and the Rashba just came over to visit from time to time. That's the difference. So the Maggid Mishnah is number one, B'malchus HaRambam, both the Maggid Mishnah and the Kesef Mishnah. As we spoke about at great length in our previous year, assume, according to the Rambam, there is no Tosefes Shabbos. Neither Shabbos nor Yom Tov, not even Yom Kippur, only Lagabe Inui, Yisra Achila V'Shtia, not regarding Malacha. The same Radbaz disagrees. And this is an interesting case study. On one hand, the Radbaz exalts the Maggid Mishnah and he says, nobody is more reliable in the Rambam's shittas than the Maggid Mishnah. But in this case, he disagrees with the Maggid Mishnah. Tshuvas Radbaz Chelekei, two different tshuvas, Kuf Yud Gimel Reish Ayin Ches. The Radbaz says he thinks the Rambam cannot paskin there is no Tosefes Shabbos. Totally unreasonable that the Rambam would disagree with the Rif. He usually follows in footsteps of the Rif. Why would he disagree? It is somewhat of an argument, but not a very compelling one. I think the stronger argument is if the Rambam doesn't bring Tosefes Shabbos, then obviously there is no Tosefes Shabbos. However, in my writings, I don't think this is printed yet. I said maybe the Rambam does bring the din of Tosefes Shabbos. Perek Hey, Alochi Ches, the Rambam brings the Gemara. Shesh Tekiyos Toikin Be'erev Shabbos. The fifth Tekiya is Levatele Su'am Mimalocha. It's not Shabbos yet. There still is another Tekiya to come. There still is Tekiya number 6, but Tekiya number 5 is Levatele Su'am Mimalocha. Maybe that is defined as the Tosefes Shabbos. Another diuk which I wrote in my sefer. The Rambam Perek Alocha Gimel writes, Hamadlik is an error. But look at that. Tzorech lahadlik meboid yom kodim shkiyas ha'ma'on. This is double lashon. Maboid Yom, Kodim Shkias Chama. If it's Kodim Shkias Chama, we know that it's Maboid Yom. Why would the Rambam use dual language? Maybe the Rambam comes to indicate Maboid Yom, Kodim Shkias Chama. It needs to be a certain time before the Shkia. That's Maboid Yom, Kodim Shkias Chama. So that is what I would say in the opinion of the Radbaz. But I still feel, Ibidi d'Italia, the Maggid Mishnah and Kesed Mishnah are right. It's not the derech of the Rambam to be meramis halachas. If the Rambam paskins sheyesh tosefes Shabbos, the Rambam would clearly write moisifin mechol ala kodesh, and one is mechuyev into tosefes Shabbos. But lo nachnis roshenu ben horim gedolim. Who am I to come between the Radbaz, the Maggid Mishnah, and Kesed Mishnah? It's not really an afkaman and a halach. Because the Shulchan Aruch writes in Reish Samach Aleph Siv Beis, Yesh oimerim shetzorech v'hoisav machor ala kodesh. And in the previous year, I already said, it's clear that the Beis Yosef paskins, there is tosefes Shabbos. So what I said up to this point is a brief summary of our previous year with a few new nikudas. From this point on, I want to continue. The tour also doesn't think they're going to have to set the Shabbos. And the Achronim maintain that the tour follows, in this case, in the footsteps of the Rambam. And the Torah also doesn't pass into Sefer Shabbos. Shulchan Aruch writes, Yesh oimim shetzorech v'hoisav menachon ala kodesh. Why yesh oimim? Kesed Mishnah Shul Tosai. Because of the Rambam and the Torah. But the Beis Yosef paskins, like Tosfos, Rosh, Rif. Because it is uncommon that the Beis Yosef paskins like Yidel Ashkenaz, Tosfos and Rosh against the Rambam, especially when the two is together with the Rambam. But in this case, the Beis Yosef paskins, we should have the Sefer Shabbos. So my question is this: according to the two and the Rambam, there is no mitzvah of the Sefer Shabbos, but is there a din of the Sefer Shabbos? Is the din and the mitzvah dependent one on the other? And if there is no mitzvah, there also is no such a thing as the Sefer Shabbos. If there is no mitzvah, there's no possibility, non-existent. If there is no mitzvah of the Sefes, then maybe there could be no Tesefes. Or would we say, no, it's not a chiyuv, but it still is a rishos, it's not a chiyuv, but it's a possibility. You're not obliged to be Moisef Machal Ala Kodesh, but if you wish you could, that's a very interesting chakir. And I think this is a machlokes between the two and the Maggid Mishnah. Because the Maggid Mishnah, in the very same source, in Perek Aleph Hilchos Shvisas also, the Maggid Mishnah writes, Lo motzasi b'divrei HaRambam Kabbalah o Oiseres. I have not found, in the words of the Rambam, that there is any Kabbalah that brings forth a prohibition to do a malach. So the Maggid Mishnah clearly maintains, according to the Rambam, it's not only that you don't have a chiyuv with the Sefer Shabbos, there's no such a thing as the Sefer Shabbos. If you don't have to, then you can't. But the Torah, in 4 different sources, shares with us the concept of the Sefer Shabbos, even though in Reish Samach Aleph, he follows the Rambam and he doesn't bring the din of tzorach lahoisef menachol ala kodesh. Where are the 4 sources in the Torah? Reish Samach Gimel. Reish Samach Aleph, he ignores the Sefer Shabbos. Reish Samach Gimel is Adlukas Aner. And the Torah brings a machlokes Rishonim. Does the Sefer Shabbos start by Adlukas Aner, or when you daven Tfilas Arvis and you say Baruch? According to the Halachas Gedolos, the Sefer Shabbos is dependent on Hadlochas Anera. According to Tosfos, Tefillah. So the Torah does acknowledge that there is such a thing as the Sefer Shabbos. Even though the Torah follows in the Rambam's opinion, there is no chiyuv of the Sefer Shabbos. But he does bring the machlokes. When does the Sefer Shabbos start? By Lukas Ner Shabbos, or rather by Tefillah Shabbos? Reish Samech Zayin. The Torah brings the same question that Tosfos asks. Ubelvad shelo yakdim. You can't daven early. But the Torah writes, but the minig is to daven Marav Shabbos earlier than all the week. And why is that? Because of the Sefer Shabbos. Number two, the Torah does recognize the Sefer Shabbos. Shin Tzadik Gimel. The Torah brings a machlokes whether it is permissible to make an eruv bechetzeres la'achar shekiblu al atzmam Shabbos. Both opinions are also brought in the Shulchan Aruch, as we shall shortly see. So the Torah brings a machlokes whether a person is makabel Shabbos, whether he's also be'eruv. So obviously, according to the Torah, there is such a thing as the Sefer Shabbos. And finally, Tov Ayin Beis, which is an Hilchos Pesach, not an Hilchos Shabbos. But it comes back to halacha we discussed in our previous year. What is it about? Leila say that you could daven early. You could make kiddush early. But you can't eat matzah early. And why? Because iskash matzah Pesach. And just like you can't eat korban Pesach before Tzeitzek Yechavim, you can't eat matzah before Tzeitzek Yechavim. And that is clearly in the footsteps of Tosfos, Psachim Tzadites. And Tosfos explains, you could eat the Suda early Shabbos because of the Sefer Shabbos. Matzah is an exception. So in these four sources we find in the Torah, there is a concept of the Sefer Shabbos, even though it's not a mitzvah and it's not a chiyuv. So that's a machlokes, the Maggid Mishnah and the Torah. It is relevant to our discussion because the Gemara says Rav Tzori Shel Shabbos B'Erev Shabbos. And our previous year we explained, according to Tosfos, it's all about the Sefer Shabbos. How does the Rambam explain this Gemara? The Rambam clearly says, Kiddush, Leil Shabbos and Yom Tov, the same as Abdullah, is Besoif HaYom or Samuch Lo. Kiddush and Abdullah doesn't need to be scientifically precisely at the beginning and the end of the day. But according to the Rambam, the question is how early? Common sense dictates, Svora Yeshora would say, if it's not the Sefer Shabbos, then it needs to be Samuch. 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But the plag is very early. So according to Tosfos, you could be makabel to Sefer Shabbos from the plag, but according to the Rambam, it's not reasonable. However, if we assume that the Torah is right, contrary to the Maggid Mishnah, then even according to the Rambam, even according to those opinions that do not accept the chiyuv of the Sefer Shabbos, but there still is a possibility of the Sefer Shabbos, and that would be from the plag. Let's move forward. Before we address our question directly, there's a stira in Shulchan Aruch regarding the halacha I mentioned just 3 minutes ago. Reish Samach Aleph Siv Zayin. Shulchan Aruch says, it is permissible to be matnin, to do atmana or eruv v'chetzeros even after you're makabel to Sefer Shabbos. Shin Tzadik Gimel, Shulchan Aruch means 2 opinions. And Shulchan Aruch says, when you're makabel to Sefer Shabbos, you can no longer do an eruv. V'yesh oimrim that you could. Whenever the Mechaber writes opinion number 1, Bistama, opinion number 2, Yesh Oimrim, Klal Godol B'Yadeinu. Ikar Halacha is Shita Kamoi, first opinion. So here, it is clear that after your Makabel Shabbos, you cannot Maniach Eruv. There are 2 different approaches to the Miyash of the Stira. And each of them, G'doilei Achronim, the Dolel Mervova. You're probably familiar. The Hagos and Shulchan Aruch Dolel Mervova is the Noida B'Yehuda. And Shulchan Aruch HaRav, Reish Samach Aleph. Shulchan Aruch HaRav was a Talmud of the Maggid of Mezritch. The Noida B'Yehuda is the biggest Misnagid of that very same period. They were contemporaries, but they learned the same Torah. And in this case, they had the very same Chiddush. And they say there's a difference between Kabbalah Shabbos and Kabbalah Tosefes Shabbos. Wow, seems to be a Chiddush. You could be Makabel Tosefes Shabbos before it says Saker Choven. You could be Makabel Shabbos before it says Saker Choven. Wow, that seems like pure lumdus. Advorim misyashvim beloshon l'shulchan aruch. Because, interesting, the Reish Samach Aleph, Siv Zayin, Shulchan Aruch says, even after you are Makabel Tosefes Shabbos, you could still do the Eruv. Shin Tzaddik Gimel, Kibel Shabbos, you cannot do the Eruv. Okay, fits into the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch, but L'chayre doesn't make sense. And early Shabbos is Tosefes Shabbos. What do you mean Kabbalah Shabbos before Tzeitzei Kechovim? Before Tzeitzei Kechovim, it's not Shabbos. So there's a Gemara in Yuma, you could be Makabel Tosefes Shabbos. But how would we explain the Shnei Dinim b'Tosefes Shabbos? It's only one posuk, one drosha, one concept. Very difficult to understand Shnei Dinim b'Tosefes Shabbos. One could be Makabel Tosefes Shabbos. One could go beyond that and be Makabel Shabbos. It's a gewaldige Chiddush. The Chiddush that L'chayre has no source in the Rishonim, and it is also extremely difficult to comprehend, to understand. L'chayre, every Kabbalah Shabbos L'fnei Azman, L'fnei Tzeitzei Kechovim b'tzad Avada, L'fnei Ashkim b'tzad Sofek, is defined as Tosefes Shabbos, because what is Tosefes Shabbos? Try to translate it into English. Addition to the Shabbos. If it's before Tzeitzei Kechovim, it's an addition to the Shabbos. So this derech is a derech mechudeshes, difficult to understand. Mistaver, like the Elio Rabbe, Pri Mekodim, Ocher Shulchan, and their approach is not lumdus, practical, halachic. A yochid that was Makabel Tosefes Shabbos could still put an Eruv. But if the tzibur was Makabel, if it's the minagu iyor, the tzibur daven marav, Kabbalas tzibur yeshbo mishna toikef. And if the tzibur was Makabel, you could no longer do Eruv Chetzeis. As I said, doesn't have the spark of lumdus, but it's mistaver and lemon. So after all these introductions, which in a way are just ashlama to the previous year, let's go back to the question, is there any problem in making an early Shabbos? L'chayre it's a Gemara. Rav Tzoli shel Shabbos b'yerev Shabbos. One could make Kiddush. We quoted in the previous year, quoted again 10 minutes ago. Taisis, Avik Psuchim, Tzadik Testament Beis, and the Rosh as well. You can eat Suda Shabbos from the plug. Only matzah would be an exception because of the Hekesh L'Korban Pesach. Comes along the Mogan Avraham, Reish Samach Aleph, and he has a question. When we learn the Gemara in Brochas Chov Zayin, coming back to the very basic and fundamental source, the Gemara says, Rav Tzoli shel Shabbos b'yerev Shabbos, because he holds the shit of Rabbi Yehuda. from Plaga Mincha, it's Laila. So as the Magen Avraham, but our minig is, we daven Marav after Tzesek Yechovit. We daven Mincha after the Plag. So obviously, we don't maintain Halachic Reb Yehuda. So if you daven Mincha after the Plag, how could you be Makal Shabbos after the Plag? That seems to be a Tarta de Set. That's the question of the Magen Avraham. And the Magen Avraham suggests 3 different answers. Each of them is a chiddush. So the Magen Avraham says it's only in the beginning of the sugya that the Gemara maintains Haba Hantalia. Rav Shabbos V'Erev Shabbos is because Halachic Reb Yehuda Plaga Mincha is night. But in the last line of that sugya, the Gemara says the Ovid Kemar Ovid, the Ovid Kemar Ovid. And the Magen Avraham says, in this statement, the Gemara retracts. And an early Shabbos, the Sefer Shabbos, is not necessarily dependent on the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that you can't daven mincha after the Plag. I don't remember whether I ever told you the story. As a young bocher, I accompanied the Kloisenberger Rebbe, my great Rebbe, Agoan Atzadik, the Divrei Yatziv, on an asiyah to the Kibbutz Tzadikim in North. And you know the Kloisenberger Rebbe, to him, Rabbeinu Tam, is out of base. And he wasn't makbid to daven mincha before the shkiyah. And it happened to be that he stopped to daven mincha by the Yehuda Bar Iloi. And it was about 15 minutes after the shkiyah. And then by night, he had terrible pangs of regret. Just occurred to him, according to the Yehuda, you need to daven mincha before the Plag. And he davened mincha after the shkiyah by the cave of Rabbi Yehuda. And he felt terrible about it. So he made a special nesiyah to the cave of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi with the minyan. And it was probably the only time in his life that he davened mincha on a weekday before the Plag. So that's an interesting story about it, but it would be a slur. So the first teretz of the Magen Avraham is the halacha, the din of Rav Tzori Shel Shabbos V'Erev Shabbos, the Sefer Shabbos from the Plag, is not dependent on the opinion of Yehuda. Number 2 is a big chiddush. Tfilos keneged korbonos tiknu. That is what we learn in Brochos Chavalim and Beis. Shachas keneged tomet shel shachar. Mincha tomet shel bein ha'arbaim. Marav keneged evorim ufedorim shenishtayaru. After all the daily korbanos, sometimes part of the basar on the mizbeach wasn't thoroughly consumed by fire, and you still put it on the mizbeach, and that burns all night. By night, there is no akrovas korbanos. The only thing that happens by night in the Beis Hamikdash is the meat, the leftovers that were not consumed, and we put them on the mizbeach even after nightfall. But that is only in the middle of the week. It's not Doiches Shabbos. So Shabbos, they put the Eiverim Upedorim al Gabe and Mizbeach necessarily before the Shkia. So Marev is Keneged Eiverim Vepedorim. So Tfilas Avis Belel Shabbos Kodesh could be earlier than all week. Because all week, the Eiverim Vepedorim, you could put on the Mizbeach all night. Not Shabbos, not Leil Shabbos, not Doiches Shabbos. So this is our halacha miyuchedes, according to Magen Avraham. Marav, Friday night, as an early man than all week round. That's a big chiddush. The third teretz of the Magen Avraham is Kaimon Keshittas of Mordechai. It's only a time to this Saturday if you have a mincha and a marav the very same day between Plag and Shkia, the very same day. But if you daven marav yesterday, you could still daven mincha today. And from one day to the other, it would not be tarted Sabbath. And because the Gemara says the Ovid Kemar Ovid, with the Ovid Kemar Ovid, one day your minute could be according to the Yehuda, the other day according to Chacham. So yes, it's true. We usually daven mincha after the plag. Lo kirev Yehuda. But Leil Shabbos, we could daven Marav after the plag, as long as we daven mincha before the plag. And it's not defined as a tata desada. These are the three terutzim of the Mogen Avraham. But at the end of the day, the Mogen Avraham is just miyashiv, the psak of the Shulchan Aruch, and the Rishonim. Which brings us to an other Mogen Avraham. And the Mogen Avraham Alei Samach Zayin quotes the Shlo, quoting the Sefer Hasidim, that a person that makes an early Shabbos should at least eat one kazayas la'acha tzeis ha'kaychel. To be choishesh regarding Suda Shabbos, that you can't eat Suda Shabbos into Sefer Shabbos, you need to eat la'acha tzeis ha'kaychel. The Bach quotes the same chumrah in the name of Maral Miprad. These are very important poskim. The Bach, Maral Miprad, Shlom, Sefer Hasidim, quoted by the Mogen Avraham, and the Mogen Avraham says, Toiv l'hachmir. Yocha Shulchan writes on this spot, it's a chumrah yasera, because after all, it's against the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, Tosfos, Rosh. So why be machmir? Yocha Shulchan writes, it's a chumrah yasera. Even the Mogen Avraham says, Toiv l'hachmir. To what extent? Reish, Ayin, Aleph. Sif Aleph and Shulchan Aruch. Reish, Ayin, Aleph is the dinam of Kiddush. Kishi yovoy lebeis o yemaher lekadesh. When a person comes home, he should make Kaddish as soon as possible. Minchas Oshes Miras Shabbos. I mentioned this sefer many times because it is so relevant to the sugis we're learning. And out of the 32 svarim I write, I have special fondness. It's a very beautiful, useful sefer. It's Mir Shabbos and Minchas Osher. I brought a story. One of my precious sons-in-law is HaRav Bainish Rosenbaum. My mechutin was a Yankov Rosenbaum from Monsey, the miyasid of, I think it's the biggest girls' school in Monsey, from girls' school, Beis Lochel, I think. And was a very special person, the Yankov Rosenbaum. And in the family, they have the story that the Pittsburgher Rav was once a guest by the Chafetz Chaim. Maybe I get the names wrong. And the Chafetz Chaim came home from shul, and he skipped everything before Kiddush, and he immediately said Kiddush before saying Shalom Aleichem. I don't think the Chafetz Chaim said Askin Sedos from the Ariya Kodesh. That's a many Hasidim. But everybody says Shalom Aleichem. And the Chafetz Chaim explained that Achnos Zarchim comes before Shalom Aleichem. So after Kiddush, after they washed, he said Shalom Aleichem and he greeted the Malachim. So he said Achnos Zarchim comes before Malachi HaShoris. So the Shulchan Aruch says, Kishiv Rabbeisoi Yamai LaKadosh. And if he and goes without saying, if he needs to make Kiddush immediately, he needs to eat immediately. Because Kiddush needs to be Mamukim Suda. And the Taz writes, even if it's before the Shkia. Even if it's before the Shkia. The Bialocha on the spot says, Toiv Liminoya. If it's before the Shkia, it's not really that good to do. Why? Because the Mogen Avraham asks, Lachar it's a stira. We don't paskin according to the Yehuda. And to me, this Bialocha was always a pillar. Bialocha writes, but the Mogen Avraham has a kasha. It's true the Mogen Avraham has a kasha, but the Mogen Avraham also writes 3 terutzim. So what's wrong with the terutzim of the Mogen Avraham? Is it because he gives 3 terutzim, then is it weaker than giving 1 teretz? I don't think so. Just as good, maybe better. After all, it's the Shulchan Aruch, agreed upon by the Ramah, based on Tosfos and the Rosh. So the Magen Avraham asks the kasha, and he's miyashav the kasha 3 terutzim. So why not rely on the Magen Avraham and the Taz? So Adal v'hakotten mul hadras ka'oinoi shel Mishnah Berurah. I don't really understand what bothers the Bialacha, why it's toivel and noya. According to the Magen Avraham, the Magen Avraham asks a kasha, and he seems to be happy with his terutzim. However, that's the Mishnah Berurah toivel and noya. The question is, what price? What extent? Rani is dieting. When Seisek Chobam is late, and there's a certain bittul oinik Shabbos, and the kids will fall asleep, your wife will fall asleep. She worked to prepare Shabbos. Lechatchila shebelechatchila to make an early Shabbos, and rely on Tosfos, Rosh, Shulchan Aruch, agreed upon by the Ramah, agreed upon by the Magen Avraham. The Magen Avraham is a kasha. He answers 3 terutzim. However, it is kidai. Don't finish the Suda before Tzeisek HaChavim. And after Tzeisek HaChavim, eat the Kazayas Chala. That is recommended by the other Magen Avraham, based on the Shla, Sefer Hasidim, HaRav, Miprak. So my psak is, if there's no need, why make an early Shabbos? Winter, I wouldn't recommend making an early Shabbos, but it becomes really late. Your wife is going to fall asleep. Your kids are going to be in bed. They're not going to sing Smiras Shabbos as they should. They're not going to listen to your Divrei Torah. It's a lechatchila to make an early Shabbos, not only in America. I encourage early Shabbos in Yerushalayim as well. Because I have a shul, I don't make an early Shabbos, but many of my married children make early Shabbos, and I encourage them to do so. There's a new minhag in Yerushalayim, and some people daven early, make Kiddush, have a Suda Shabbos, and then 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, they have a minyan, Tfilas Marav in Beis HaKnesset, after Suda Shabbos. This is based on a Magen Avraham Reish Ayin Aleph Sifei. The Magen Avraham writes, L'achar shekibel Shabbos, muter lakadosh, v'lechel Suda b'yoyim, and then daven Marav. And if somebody wants to do that, Rashai, it's permissible. I want to stress, in my opinion, the Magen Avraham doesn't write it's recommended, it is permissible. Rashai. What's the Chiddush? The Gaon disagrees. HaRav Kuf Yud Zayin. The Gaon argues, Rav Soli, Shal Shabbos B'Erev Shabbos, and the Gemara asks, did he make Kiddush as well? And the Gemara says, he made Kiddush as well. So davening comes before Kiddush. That's the argument of the Gra. Kiddush alakois comes after Kiddush b'tfilah. So first you say Kiddush b'tfilah, and then Kiddush alakois. First Marav, then Kiddush. That is what we learn from Torah Sagra and Ma'aseh. So this seems to be a machlokes Magen Avraham and the Gra. But what is the plus? What's the upside? What is the revach? Even the Magen Avraham writes, Rashai. It's permissible. I could argue that there is an upside, but this is a huge discussion, which I won't get into, because it's a general discussion, which I discussed at length in Minchas Osher Klolei HaMitzvos. Minchas Osher Klolei HaMitzvos is one of my specials for them. But actually, I think every time I mention one of my svarim, I write it's one of my specials for them. I'd say. So I think it is always preferable to be mekayim a mitzvah and yiltzi yedei choiva ba'ofen ha'mahuda b'yoisa. Even though, in my opinion, you could be mekayim the mitzvah in a somewhat b'diavad fashion and then do it again oifen amahuda. But lechatchila, it's better to be yoitzi de choivo, behidu. So if you daven an early Marav, you're not yoitzi of kriyas HaRav. So you need to say Krishma again. But the Krishma you're going to say in the middle of the Suda, you're not going to say with the brachas. So there is somewhat a hidu to be yoitzi de choivis Krishma shel arves b'birchoiseho. But I don't think that is justification to go into the machlokes between Mogen Avraham and the Gra. And therefore, if you want, you can earn Shabbos. Daven Marav, Samach l'Kabbalas Shabbos. And I don't like the minig of splitting Kabbalah Shabbos and going later to Daven Marav. It's against the Gra. And even the Mogen Avraham doesn't recommend it. So those that make an early Shabbos, I think it's preferable. The early Shabbos should be Kabbalah Shabbos, Tfilas Shabbos, Kiddush, Suda. But try to leave a Kazayas. Don't finish the Suda before it says Sakachot. That is my opinion. I will finish this year with a Shaila, a pressing Shaila, which is a complicated Shaila, and I'll give you just food for thought. And these Shailas come to me from two different fields. Soldiers in the IDF, and there's so many wonderful, from dedicated young tzaddikamach that serve in the army, and doctors and nurses. A doctor that knows he needs to start an operation somewhat after Knesset Shabbos. It's a life-saving operation. A soldier in active duty, and he's going out on an ambush or other service, which once again is Deicha Shabbos. We're dealing with Pikuach Nefesh after Knesset Shabbos. So he won't have a proper Kiddush, he won't have a proper Suda Shabbos. He's Machal Shabbos, it's Pikuach Nefesh. Is it preferable for them to be Machal Shabbos early? Because the designated time is 9 o'clock, 8:30. They can be Machal Shabbos 6 o'clock and have a beautiful Kabbalah Shabbos in shul with singing. They can make Kiddush with their family. They can eat Suda Shabbos. And then they'll be Machal Shabbos. So maybe I didn't present the question accurately. The time they will need to be Machal Shabbos, or at least begin Chilul Shabbos, is before Tzei Sefer Chovim. It will continue after Tzei Sefer Chovim, but at least the beginning will be before Tzei Sefer Chovim. So on one side, they want to be Machal Shabbos early to have the spirit of Shabbos. Normal Kiddush, normal davening with the minyan, sitting with the family in Suda Shabbos. But they're causing Chilul Shabbos because they're Machal Shabbos after Kabbalah to Sefer Shabbos. But it's justified, it's Pikuach Nefesh. Okay, but Pikuach Nefesh is mutter when need be. But why be Machal Shabbos on Menas Lechalala? Doesn't make sense to be Machal Shabbos, Mekabel Shabbos on Menas Lechalala. On the other hand, why shouldn't a person have a proper Tfilah Shabbos, Kiddush, B'mokum Suda, Shabbos with your family, and then Pikuach Nefesh? Especially that it needs to be Machal Shabbos anyway. Not only to Sefer Shabbos, which is thus the mitzvah to say, he will need to keep on being Machal Shabbos after Tzei Chom, which is a Koros. I don't have a clear tshuva on this side. Think about it. Talk to you at a bonum about it. Maybe we'll share what I think at another opportunity. But it's a fascinating question.